Yeah, hello. Good evening, everyone. Let's make a start with this evening's CSSGJ seminar. My name is Andrea Spieler. I'm one of the 5 co-directors, and it's my pleasure to chair this evening's event, but also to introduce our speaker. Now, this evening we have our very own CSSGJ member, Andrea Taborri, with us, who is going to uh, present on his PhD topic, Mercosur, European Union Association Agreement, and its implications for the Mercosur countries. Now, Andrea Taborri is a PhD student at the University of Perugia in Italy, and he holds a master's degree in Latin American studies from the Complutense University of Madrid. Now, in the past, he conducted research on the maquiladora industry in Paraguay and on Mercosur in the context of global capitalism, having actually already spent extensive period of 6 months in the region. His research interests are in the field of international political economy and span from the implications of free trade agreements, hence the focus on the EU-Mercosur agreement, as well as the global dynamics of uneven development in global value chains, imperialism, and dependency, with a focus on Latin America. It's great to have Andreas speaking to us this evening. It really reasserts a long tradition of CSSGJ to be a kind of a scholarly community which doesn't just advance knowledge in the area of social and global justice, but actually also introduces and brings up and coming scholars, PhD students, into the academic fold. And it's great that now, as we are independent but also fully virtual, it's great to be at this point and have, in a way, Andrea continue this tradition of ours, which was established years ago when we were still always meeting in Nottingham at the university here. So, Andrea, it's great to have you with us. It's great to see what you are going to report on your research project on the Mercosur EU Free Trade Agreement. We proceed in the usual manner. You've got about 35 to 40 minutes for your presentation, and then we have a similar amount of time for question, answers, and comments. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andreas. It's a real pleasure to be doing this talk today. And yeah, I'll be sharing my screen if it's okay. Let's see. All right. Can you see it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay then.
All good.
So, yeah, as Andreas was saying, I'll be talking about my PhD thesis topic, which is actually the Mercosur European Union Association Agreement. And I'll be looking at it today through the lens of dependency, uneven development, and global crisis. So just to briefly introduce the structure of the talk, I'll be going through the theoretical framework that underpins my analysis. Then I'll be going through, hopefully quite quickly, the main elements of the agreement. Then the uneven relation between Mercosur and the European Union as it is today, so before the agreement. And then in the last 2 points, I'll be looking at the implications of the agreement in reshaping dependency and strengthening extractivism in Mercosur countries. And lastly, I'll look at the implications in the specific field of the energy transition, which is quite an important topic today. So just to briefly mention where my research comes from theoretically, the key concept is the concept of dependency, dependency of Latin America in general. This concept evolved in opposition to modernization theory, but also to the dogmatic conceptions of development of communist parties in Latin America in the 50s and 60s. Firstly emerged ante litteram in the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, with scholars such as Raúl Prebisch and or Celso Furtado, who basically laid the founding, the base for the center periphery scheme, even though from a mainstream economy perspective. But still, they found that underdevelopment is actually the other phase of the other phase of development, and not the opposite. After that, in Cardoso and Faleto talked about dependency in a more specific manner, but from an institutional or Weberian, some say, approach. Basically, dependency was for them the consequence of the historical development of institutions in Latin America. Thus, development could be achieved with the right institutions, even from within dependency. Now, opposite to that, but also parallel to that, a Marxist dependency theory developed, and that's I think it has some very useful concepts that we'll see in a bit to understand how capitalism works in Latin America, has worked historically, and works today. For Marxist dependency theory scholars such as Rui Mauro Marini, Vania Bambir, and many others, dependency is the product of how capitalism work and has historically worked. Therefore, capitalism in Latin America works according to the needs of capital accumulation in the center, developed countries, it has, so Marxist dependency theory, just let me go through three key concepts that we will see later that will come back and will be useful for this analysis. So for Marxist dependency theory, capitalism in Latin America works as a sui generis capitalism, dependent capitalism, which means that it works according to the laws of capital accumulation discovered by Marx, but with some peculiarities. Those peculiarities are specifically two of them, the most important ones, are the rupture or the elision of the dependent cycle of accumulation, money, commodity, money, that we all know, where the realization sphere takes place historically in the world market. And this, of course, has important implications for it leads to structural imbalances in Latin American economies. Since, for example, wages, internal wages, are not crucial, are not relevant for the realization of capital. And this underpins, crystallizes super exploitation, which is super exploitation for Marini, for Marxist dependency theories, is the retribution of labor below its value, and the systematic retribution of labor below its value as a response to value transfer from Latin America, from dependent countries to core countries. So yeah, after that, after these, let's keep in mind those concepts and go ahead with some figures, facts and figures about the agreement. Well, first of all, and very briefly, I want to summarize in a few words the 25, almost 26 years long negotiation process of the agreement. It started in 1999, and now it seems to be coming to an end. What I want to stress is that it has accelerated quite sharply among global tensions, global geopolitical tensions, and geoeconomic tensions. Now the agreement is facing approval from the European Parliament and the Council, it has actually been divided into one interim agreement only containing trade-related measures on which the European Union has competence, and then the actual agreement, which will need the ratification of national parliament that eventually will replace the interim agreement. So this is the situation, and I wanted to show also the path of negotiation against growing conflictuality in the world. It's of course I'm not saying that just geopolitics determines the course of the negotiations, but I mean, it is important, I think, to bear that in mind, right? We can see that the new phase of negotiation of 2016 follows a sharp increase in like state-based conflicts, for example, which, well, I think it's something interesting just as it is. But what does the agreement include? What provisions? Here we have a tariff reduction schedule. It is scheduled for 2040. Not all of them, but that's the main time frame. And I have, of course, these products are not all the products that are affected, but just the most relevant ones. And I have highlighted in orange the one that I think are more important. We can see the reduction in tariffs for animal products, beef, other kinds of meat, motor vehicles, electrical equipment, machinery, computers, so on and so forth. What is important to note, and with this, I go to the next figure, it is that it sort of reproduces what we will see. It is the current trade relation between the European Union and Mercosur. Particularly important is the reduction in the reduction in tariffs for ethanol and biodiesel that will enter the European Union with an increased quota and partially tariff-free, and critical minerals. We will see that later, its importance, but as well as, of course, the reduction for cars entering Mercosur tariff-free, and other agricultural and livestock farming product that will enter the European Union tariff-free. Now, just very briefly concerning critical minerals, which are minerals that are, by admission of the European Union, critical for the European industry. The agreement foresees a preferential treatment for EU countries in case export tariffs are imposed, and actually bans export tariffs only with some exceptions for Brazil, which is the most important exporter of CRMs. It also bans export monopolies and non-automatic import licensing requirements. So in broad terms, it improves accessibility to the agreement intends to improve the accessibility to critical raw materials. Furthermore, I want to mention that the agreement also includes provisions, a chapter actually that that entails investment liberalization with the usual right of establishment and equal treatment for firms of both blocks. One interesting element is the access to government procurement on both sides, which is quite appealing to European companies concerning, for example, the Brazilian market, which is has a big public procurement market, and Argentina as well, although Argentina is facing harder times. And then it entails protection of geographical indications, which was a historical claim from the European Union in order to be able to sign the agreement. And also it envisions an elimination of non-trade barriers. So like barriers to trade that are like non-directly related to tariffs, such as export and import monopolies or custom fees and taxes. and of course, a broad promotion of competition and limitation of the scope of subsidies. This was, in a few words, what the agreement entails. And now I want to try to show that the agreement fosters a relation between the European Union and Mercosur that is actually asymmetrical. Just briefly, I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying that free trade agreements or free trade in general is the cause of uneven development of capitalism. Actually, it's rather the opposite. I think uneven development of capitalism foster free trade agreements that improve the conditions of capital accumulation. But of course, it is a mutual influencing relation, because free trade agreements also sort of crystallize, exacerbate the dynamics of uneven development of capitalism. To understand their uneven relation, I think we have to understand that Mercosur is a project of dependent integration, in the sense that it was a response that regional capitals gave to the tendencies of globalization in the 90s to secure some spaces of accumulation, mainly Brazilian but Argentinian capital as well. And I think this already tells something about the insertion of Mercosur as an economic bloc into global capitalism. But let's see how this asymmetry plays out in concrete terms. So, as you can see, the main exported products from Mercosur countries are in are basically agricultural or livestock products, almost all of them. Whereas for the 4 selected countries of the European Union, we have quite the opposite. Technological products, motor vehicles, machinery, pharmaceuticals, even airplanes, France. This, I think, is a first sight of what this asymmetry looks like. This, of course, is reflected in the European Union trade balance of trade, which, of course, in which machinery and vehicles and increasingly chemicals play a prominent role, and it also reflects on the Mercosur structure of exports. Here, I think it's what this graph shows is quite interesting. The fact that we're seeing sort of a reprimarization, and this term will come back later, of the exports of Mercosur, because we see that the importance of primary goods is growing, has been growing in the last 30 years, whereas the relevance, the share of manufactured goods, be them high, medium, or low technology manufacture, is shrinking, has been shrinking. So I think that's quite telling about the trend as well of the industrialization and of reprimarization. So this asymmetry is also mirrored in the actual trade relation, where basically the European Union exports machinery, chemicals, and transport equipment to Mercosur, and Mercosur exports to the European Union, well, agricultural product, minerals, and pulp and paper, which is basically another primary product. Also, looking at FDI stock is quite, I mean, there's not even a comparison of the amount of FDI stock that the EU has in Mercosur compared to the Mercosur stock of FDI in the European Union. And all this situation I think, is well represented in this graph, where we can see the trade relation according to technological complexity. So on the left side, and I'm sorry, it's in Spanish, but I had the graph in Spanish, but basically what we can see is that the Mercosur countries have a surplus in primary products, primary goods, and manufacture originated from primary goods, and that surplus converts into a deficit quite quickly, quite sharply, for manufactured goods, be them medium or high technology manufacture. And is quite telling about this asymmetry. This image, of course, is not only commercial. The commercial asymmetry is also reflected in the internal economic structure of the EU and Mercosur countries. I took some indicators such as productivity of labor, R&D expenditure, monthly earnings, both nominal in US dollar and parity of purchase power, and human development index. And we can see that the asymmetry is quite sharp in almost all the cases. So having said that, being set like the framework of what the European Union Mercosur agreement is, and the situation in which it will be inserted, I think we can say that according to the tariff schedule reduction, it will somehow it is well equipped to reproduce, to foster, to crystallize the uneven relation that we have seen, because it follows the reduction of tariffs follows the same pattern that is in place right now. And this has, of course, implications for the Mercosur countries. I will proceed. I think it is useful to divide the implication in two layers. I will proceed from a more general, abstract sort of layer to a more concrete implication, right? So, on a more general layer, of course, all projections available agree on the fact that it will promote economic growth through promoting exports, economic output, and GDP growth. Of course, there are economic sectors that are benefited both in the EU and in Mercosur. Now, of course, economic growth is not neutral. And in Mercosur, it will is likely to be based on the reprimarization of its economy. And what do I mean by reprimarization? I mean strengthening a pattern of capital accumulation based on the primary export sector. There's activists always sometimes say it is a cows for cars agreement, but that's quite telling, right? It's true. It's increasing production of primary goods and exports of primary goods for Mercosur, and increasing, for example, cars exports in the European Union. That's the direction where the agreement goes towards. This promotes disjointed growth of the primary export sector, and this is because the primary export sector is actually in the Mercosur countries is the sector that the most competitive sector in the international markets, but it is almost completely detached from the local economy, but for of course the exploitation of local labor force. This promotion of exports of the export primary export sector intensifies the rupture of the cycle of accumulation that I was talking about before, the one that Marxist dependency theory talks about, that enables and crystallizes super exploitation, right? So the products, well, basically the level of general level of wages within Mercosur countries, well, will increasingly not be necessary to realize capital invested in the primary export sector, fundamentally. It will also exacerbate value transfers through increasing the technological gap. That, as we've seen, is a key component of value transfers, and it also underpins super exploitation. Furthermore, there's a risk of an increasing industrial reserve army um, through through the dynamics of deindustrialization, which of course might happen as a result of increased competition of the Mercosur industry, which is actually present, especially in Brazil and Argentina, with the European industry. And of course, something that is quite obvious, but also always relevant for Latin American countries historically, it will increase the dependency on world market in terms of price of commodities, which it's already the case, but even more so. On a more concrete layer, what the risks associated with the agreement are, well, the risk of exacerbating already existing dynamics. Those who are familiar with Latin America know that agribusiness and mining are continuously associated with predatory practices such as deforestation, displacement of rural communities, socio-environmental conflicts in general, deforestation, monoculture farming, the use of pesticides, and all sort of those practices. Then deindustrialization, as I was saying before, which it's a concrete risk, and actually most of the projections from mainstream econometrics projections all agree that there will be a loss of jobs in the industry sector in Mercosur. The problem is that those jobs will probably not be absorbed by the agricultural, like the primary sector, also because the labor force is not perfectly displaceable in those terms. And of course, as most FTAs, it bears the risk of limiting the sovereignty in the sense of being able to legislate, of governments, Latin American governments, Mercosur governments being able to legislate through the dynamic of competition, because in order to stay competitive, well, it usually happens that governments tend or either not to legislate in a manner that could hinder profitability and competitiveness, or even legislate in a regressive manner. For example, in labor legislation or fiscal legislation, just to make two examples. So those are the risks on the more the level closer to the ground, to everyday life of the Mercosur's people. But now in the remaining 8-10 minutes, I would like to delve in a specific aspect of the European Union Mercosur agreement, association agreement, which is the energy transition. Of course, it's something that we hear about a lot nowadays, in a context of a global multifaceted crisis, which is economic, geopolitical, environmental, which manifests itself in the European Union, for example, as a crisis, an industrial crisis. And again, I'll adopt the same double-layered implication structure, but let's see that. So critical raw materials, as we've seen before, they are part of the agreement. Critical raw materials are key to the so-called green transition of the European industry, of any industry, but of the European one particularly. And they're at risk from the perspective of the European Union of supply chain disruption due to geopolitical considerations, and not only, but mainly geopolitical considerations. Actually, the European Union issued a Critical Raw Materials Act in 2024, restating the importance of raw materials and the importance of the access to raw materials. At the same time, we see a decline of the European industry. The automotive production fell by 46% between 2019 and 2024, and declining profitability of non-financial corporations. So we have these two elements that are at play. And Mercosur happens to be full of critical raw materials, specifically Brazil, but also Argentina has lithium. For instance, on a side of this discussion, Chile is not part of Mercosur, but the European Union already has secured access to critical raw materials through a free trade agreement. But what is interesting here, apart from seeing that the presence of critical raw materials in Mercosur countries, is to see that the difference between the share of global extraction in Mercosur countries and the share of global processing. And they differ quite a lot, which means that basically, currently, before the agreement, Mercosur countries, specifically Brazil, are extracting critical raw materials, but they're not processing. Also, there's an interesting aspect related to biofuels and bioethanol in particular. Bioethanol is a renewable and green fuel, mainly used for mobility, but also for the industrial applications. Brazil is the second largest producer of bioethanol in the world, just after the US. And considering the current situation of like tensions between the US and the European Union, well, I think we can understand why it is so important. It is mainly produced with corn and sugarcane, and Brazil is the leading producer of sugarcane in the world. But of course, still, it falls into the category, the production of ethanol, of manufacturing based on primary goods. So there's a low technology component product. So again, what can we say about this specific dynamic within the energy transition? Well, as we have seen, there's a crisis of the European Union industry, which needs access to critical raw materials and biofuels. Nevertheless, from the Mercosur perspective, most of the processing of those CRMs are located either in the EU or in other more developed, like more central countries. So again, it might be a bit redundant, but in this specific dynamic, what we see is, again, the promotion of the specialization of Mercosur, in this case in mining for CRMs, and agriculture and small manufacture for biofuels. One dynamic that this is more of something that an intuition, let's say, about that I have. It's hard to say if it will actually happen, but I see the opportunity, for example, for the automotive industry in European Union to basically sell obsolete means polluting products in the Mercosur countries that have a more flexible legislation. provided also that the European Union has banned, will ban non-electric cars, for example, in, I think it's 2035, if I'm not mistaken. So if the transition is not completed by then, well, I think Brazil or Argentina, the two biggest markets, could be a good like outlet for obsolete in the European Union products according to European Union standards. Then there is the aspect connected to the grassroots dynamics related to agriculture and mining, as I was saying before. In the three maps here below, you can see in the one on the left, conflicts, the brown dots are conflicts related to biomass and land, which, of course, in which sugarcane, corn, and soybean crops play a prominent role. This is a really interesting, actually, web page where you can see a very detailed account of conflicts of these sort. And on the two figures on the right, there are mining-related conflicts and the one strictly related to energy transition, to the energy transition. And well, you can see that this is mainly in Argentina, but also in Brazil, there are quite a few of them. And the agreement that does fundamentally goes in the direction of fostering this model that is currently in place, and quite surely is not equipped to revert this tendency. What are the takeaways that I think that we can have from this discussion, and also that we can talk about in a bit. So theoretically, I think it would be interesting to find the points of contact between extractivism scholarship and Marxist dependency theory. I started from Marxist dependency theory, but then I saw that extractivism literature also has a lot to say about this model, and it does so on a more sort of concrete level of analysis. So maybe they refer to two different levels of analysis. Then I think it's quite safe to say the agreement is not meant nor equipped to reduce the technological and productivity gap between the two blocks, which arguably would foster value transfer through international trade. And there's a high risk of exacerbating current predatory dynamics, as I was saying before, related to, in Latin America, almost always related to agribusiness, mining, and so on and so forth, in which the energy transition plays a prominent role. And lastly, and I'm ending, I think we should think about what a fair green energy transition means, right? Because from a critical standpoint, as I think we all agree, yes, of course, the energy transition is paramount. It's something extremely important to carry out, but how is that possible within the boundaries of capitalism and of the uneven dynamics of capitalism, dependency, imperialism, that as we have seen these sort of agreements, even though in their intentions they want to promote an energy transition, a green energy transition, that they might they're at risk of ending up fostering other problematic dynamics. And thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent. Brilliant presentation and brilliant timing, Andrea. Thank you very much.